go. Boom, look at that. We're live. We're in studio.
we go.
We've done the thing. Let me turn this bad boy on Instagram, and we are ready to rock. Hello, everyone. This is a bonus session. So typically on Multifamily Strategy, we go live every Wednesday, 3 p.m., and we go till the questions stop. Though lately that's been like 3 hours. So we're probably going to put some cap on that at some time because that's a lot of my time. And while I love hanging out with everyone, it is good to actually get time to eat dinner. Today, I'm joined with none other than Jonny Nylen, the smartest person I've ever met in maintenance.
Thanks, buddy.
It's a fact.
I appreciate it.
Jonny knows. Some people know a lot about a little. Some people know a little about a lot. Jonny knows a lot about everything. And that's pretty consistently true, especially in the maintenance thing. I've had him help us on multiple problems in our portfolio, especially at the Robinhood when things come up. Jonny's been a consistent speaker with us, and the stuff that comes up is consistent on that particular asset.
Yes.
So just a little bit of plumbing, electric, roofing, mold remediation,
furnace.
HVAC.
Yeah, your furnace went out.
Yeah, we have all sorts of stuff that we do. So as everyone joins in, again, this is a bonus section, so we'll see who decides to show up here, but very excited to get some bonus content and share some of Jonny's knowledge. Today we're going to be talking about some of the problems that we've worked on, but more importantly, things that you can do as a landlord to save yourself a ton of money or make a ton of money by doing maintenance because, especially in our space, value add.
Value adds huge.
Cody and I spend 7 figures a year in maintenance and renovation. This is like, we talk a lot about how to buy stuff with little to no money. This is how you don't lose stuff, is you keep your shit maintained.
How to maintain it. And even more than just how to maintain it, if you're already doing a remodel, what can you do during the remodel that you can get the government to pay for?
Yes.
Through rebates. There's items and things you can work on for, windows are a really solid one, especially in the multifamily sphere. We just got back from last weekend was a conference up in Arlington, and the PSC vendors were there. So PSC has a commercial team who handles multifamily and commercial buildings. And I spent about 90 minutes just sitting chatting with them about what kind of projects they cover, which the answer is almost anything that saves energy, and what kind of rebates they give. And the answer is anywhere from 10 to 70% of the bid value that they will give you back. So if you need to do a remodel,
that's really good.
So if you need to do a remodel and you're doing windows, well, they had a deal where they were, residentially, it was so many dollars off. It was like $300 off per window, but commercially, they were offering 30% off the ticket price.
Ooh.
For, so if you got your $100,000 bid for a whole building, PSC is going to pick up $30,000. Well, hey, that means you only got to pay 70. And that is,
which is a lot, especially if you're looking at the cash flow on some of these buildings.
Yeah.
It's like, how many months of cash flow is $30,000 saving you? And that's a lot in most cases.
Yeah. In most cases, some cases, that's an entire year's worth of, cash flow for some people.
Yeah, I was gonna say on our 38 plex, that is we bring in $30,000 a month on 38 units. I mean, that is a full month of that's like we have a 13th month of rent collection. That's
pretty
fantastic.
And the way that a lot of the utility companies do it is you'll pay up front and then you'll get a rebate back from them. There are a couple other things that you have to watch out because some of their contracts and some of their rebates that they're doing they offer bill credits for. And so those aren't as valuable when it's a bill credit for if you have, sub-metering done properly and you have your tenants billed out.
Yeah.
But anytime you're doing a project and you're looking at feasibility, one of the things that you have to dig into, and you call somebody like me, who's an energy code expert and who does portfolio optimization, one of the things we look at is we look at your whole scope of work and we go through and we send it off to our PSE people and we say, hey, what can you give us if we change out this R13 insulation and we're putting in R21? As we're bringing this to current code, or if we make the fenestration value. Now, fenestration, that's a fun word that nobody knows. That is whoops. Am I shaking my lightsaber? Shaking the lightsaber back here. So fenestration is a measurement of the total heat transfer surface of your walls, essentially. So it's like the walls, including the windows, and it's a bunch of math that basically figures out how good your windows are and how good your walls at resisting heat. And then there's a heat transfer coefficient for that. And if there's certain numbers you have to hit, current energy code is like 0.30. Well, if you bump it to 0.28 or 0.26, you can only be spending maybe an extra 5-10% on the bid.
Yep.
But you can get back 20 to 30% from the utility company by just spending that little extra on the bid. So there's things that we do a lot with. I specialize in HVAC, and there's a whole lot that we can do with heat pumps and high efficiency furnaces. So if you have a rental and you're replacing a furnace, you're only going to get $0 back for replacing a furnace that you have to replace. If you upgrade it to a high efficiency unit, and this is a single family, you get $350 back.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, if you're upgrading and updating to a heat pump, you get $1,500 back on a single family. On a multifamily, we're seeing rebates 45 and 50% for when we're talking about converting an entire building here in Washington State. We're talking, 20, 30 units. We're seeing bids that are, somewhere around 100 to 200 grand for the total project, and we're seeing PSE pushing forward $60,000 to $100,000 in rebates.
For those watching nationally, by the way, PSE is Puget Sound Energy.
Yeah,
they're our local energy company.
They're the local guys that we work with all the time. As we go up north, we've got Snowpud. We've got a whole series of energy companies. And the first place to start is just look at your energy bill. So if you pull up your energy bill and you see, it's got so-and-so, somewhere usually on the bottom, they'll be like, oh, and if you want some rebates or if you want to save energy or save money on your bill, go to, www.whatever/rebates or /energy saving. And you go through there and you can click through there. And of course, all of the multifamily stuff and all the commercial stuff, it's always like, oh, here's your possible ranges, but please call. Because all of the multifamily stuff and all the commercial stuff, they've actually got more money for than the homeowner stuff because it's a different bucket of grants. In most cases, it's a different bucket of government money. They got so much set aside for homeowners, they got way more set aside for commercial buildings. And that's because commercial buildings tend to waste more energy.
That makes sense. Okay. So we're gonna now that we have some people in the chat here, we're gonna go ahead and give a quick introduction to Jonny, because one of these questions actually perfectly highlights that from Dylan here. So I'll go ahead and throw that on the screen. How do you learn so much about maintenance? So a little bit of background. Who is Jonny? How did you get as versed in all this stuff? Because you know stuff about refrigerants, about plumbing, electric, HVAC. Give us the 3-minute backstory.
The 3-minute villain backstory. All right. So I was a military kid growing up, and if you've ever lived in military housing, if you accidentally punch a hole in the wall or punch a bunch of holes in the wall, you got to fix those. So I learned at a very young age how to fix drywall because you don't want to leave housing like that. Mm-hmm. And stuff breaks a lot in government housing. And my dad was Navy, and so he was always deployed. So my mom had to fix it. And she was a good farm girl from Maryland, and she knew how to fix a lot of stuff. Her dad owned a truck stop, and she could still to this day strip a tractor trailer engine faster than most mechanics can.
That's
and 50 years later, and she's brilliant at it still. So she taught me a whole lot growing up. I mean, we did our own oil changes, we did our own tires, we did our own brakes. Before I could get my driver's license, I had to change my own oil. We were always, as we moved, because we're Navy and we were submarines, so we moved all the time. So, it was painting and carpet and cleaning, and I learned how to take care of a bunch of stuff. I learned how to replace outlets and light switches. And then about 2008, I started going to college for an HVAC program. And at the same time, I also got a job in the field of HVAC, working for a commercial HVAC company doing ground up construction.
Yeah.
So I spent 5 years doing nothing but ground up construction, service, and maintenance related to commercial buildings for 5 years solid. And I got to the point where I was a senior tech, and I could, one of my last big projects there, I did $1.5 million install on a Mitsubishi City Multi for this base building, 3 stories tall. There's like 57 indoor units. There's 18 units up on the roof. There's miles of wire and piping and drainage, millions of dollars of projects. And it was fun. It was fascinating. I loved it. But they didn't pay me enough. So I left and I realized that my skills were good enough that I could get hired as a service manager. And in the HVAC world, the service manager is kind of like the go-to guy who answers the questions for the other techs and does the scheduling and does the teaching and does the training. And they're kind of like the highest tech at most residential companies. And with my skill set being as broad as it was, I got brought into that role, and it kind of encompassed everything. And I bounced around a little bit. I didn't want to stay with just commercial HVAC. I got into restaurant work, so hot side, cold side. So dealing with fryers and broilers and grills and ovens and both gas and electric and 43 phase and weird DC ones, and learning how to fix them because restaurants are always broke and they're always cheap and they always want you to fix all kinds of stuff. And then, working on the cold side and the refrigeration side, I had to refrigeration and HVAC, although they're the same industry, when it comes to the actual like science and technical know-how, it's a completely another set of the trade to learn.
Yeah.
Like, sure, the basics might apply, but you have, 3 to 4 times more complex controls, and every unit has a different control paradigm. And unlike residential where everything's standardized, or commercial where it's all in one big rooftop, in a refrigeration unit, every single one is different because they're all remote condensers outside with a little evaporator on the inside, and they only run in cooling mode, right? Because you don't have to heat up your walk-in box.
Yep.
So I picked up all these different aspects of the trade, and I moved around a lot. And somewhere along the way, I started my own company, and I did a lot of maintenance. And I started taking data 5-6 years ago when I started my current company, Tacoma Furnace. I started gathering data up because I kept hearing in this market that, HVAC's not important for a flip, and maintenance doesn't matter, and we're just going to leave this same old furnace and it's no big deal. People will buy it anyway. Nobody cares about the HVAC. Everybody comes in and the kitchen's what sells the house, not the HVAC. And I'm like, yeah, but the HVAC is what's going to run their energy bill from here to $500 a month. And then your wife's going to be giving me a call complaining.
It's all about the cash flow.
Exactly. And that's when I kind of discovered maintenance is a neglected thing in the property management world. I've been working with about a half a dozen property managers who have the combined totals of almost 3,000 doors. That I'm the go-to HVAC guy that I get called whenever furnaces break or when things go down and whatnot. And I started asking around about maintenance. What preventative maintenance are we doing? Because I keep getting the same phone calls every year, and nobody's doing anything. So that's what led to the creation of a mechanical maintenance plan that I've shared with you guys.
Yep.
That it's just like, it's basic things that you as the owner yourself could even do. Or you can hire somebody, or you can go to a local mechanical contractor and say, hey, I got handed this by some buddies and want to see what you would charge me to do this maintenance service, because it takes really, really, really good care of my equipment. And that actually started way back in the commercial days, my first days. We had a commercial building owner who back then he had over 450 commercial suite doors. So, I mean, he had over 100 just big, giant commercial buildings, strip malls, shopping malls, that kind of thing. And in his maintenance, or in his tenancy contract, he wrote in a little bit that he wanted a safety inspection done once a year on the HVAC. And because the tenants were responsible for the HVAC. And if we found no errors, he footed the bill for that maintenance, which is, I think, only like $200 or $300 a unit. They're pretty cheap. But if there was anything wrong, not only was the tenant responsible for it, the tenant had to use us to get the repairs done.
Oh, gotcha.
At the same time, this building owner, if the HVAC failed because it was 20, 30 years old, he would just buy a new one. He just said, no, I'll take care of it. I'm going to put a brand new one on here, but your job as the tenant is to maintain it. If I find you're not maintaining it, you got to foot the bill to repair it. And that company ended up, they had all of his doors under contract. And I mean, for one of my first 5 years, I did nothing but maintenance.
Yeah.
And filter changes and belt tightening and coil cleaning and electrical point tensioning for an entire year for 2,080 hours. I did nothing but drive to a site, pop off a door, change a couple filters, check the belt, put my gauges on there, make sure it was all good to go, make sure it ran in all the modes, make sure nothing was broken, and that was it for an entire year.
There we go.
Of just rote repetition.
So in summary, Jonny knows a lot about a lot because he's done a lot of different tasks. You've had a lot of jobs, a lot of different projects.
Yeah.
Jonny also just in general knows a lot about a lot of different topics because he's just someone who researches things into oblivion.
I'm a lifelong learner.
Yep.
I've got two entire separate associate's degrees and enough experience that WGU is just letting me take my master's. I'm working on my master's degree in cybersecurity, completely unrelated, but they just let me go into it because they said you have enough life experience and college credits, it counts. That's a bachelor's.
There you go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up some questions here, and
all right,
everyone try to tailor your questions to maintenance. So I'm gonna select the questions that are best sorted towards Jonny specifically being here today. Wednesday, join the channel anytime for your general questions, and we will get through all of them. But I know Jonny's a maintenance guy. But what does your occupation have a specific name? What do you currently do?
So I run a Tacoma Furnace Company. It's called HVAC or HVAC-R. It's an HVAC, heating, venting, air conditioning, and sometimes refrigeration.
Yep.
You'll also see on the side of trucks, they're also called mechanical contractors. So they're not plumbers. We're not electricians. We're better than both. We have to do everything they can do and more. Because in order to do HVAC, you have to be able to do electrical controls. You have to be able to do entire electrical circuitry, including high voltage and low voltage, and know all the requisite code for it. You have to be able to handle radiant drain, not just plumbing and drains and condensate. You have to be able to do radiant heat, radiant floors, boilers, the whole 9 yards. And so it encompasses a huge section of trade skills that your average HVAC guy has a lot more skill and knowledge because if we've got a degree in HVAC, which a lot of programs are doing now, they're making us take a semester or two of college physics, calculus, and chemistry. So like we're getting pretty heavy into the sciences because we have to do these fun things called psychometric calculations. But anyway, sorry, I gotta keep it brief so we can get through all these.
That's okay. We're getting used to the YouTube format, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. There's a few coming in. Dylan, I know, had to run here pretty soon, so I'll get through some of those questions. This is general, and Cody and I just did one of these, so I'll weigh in too. But thoughts on mobile home parks, what to watch out for. I'll answer that on a investor standpoint. You can answer that on a maintenance standpoint.
Sure.
And right now, we're replacing a septic drain field, so I have stuff on this.
Oh, yeah.
Mobile home park. So I just bought it's an RV park, but they're all permanent fixtures. We own all of them. So it's run exactly as a mobile home park. I'm considering it a mobile home park because that's what it functionally is. It has a drain field that has failed, and it's because the neighboring property is a restaurant that is tapped into our septic field, and it's apparently been like that forever. So we have a ton of grease in the thing. It also is rated for 25 units, and it's a 28-unit mobile home park. So what we're doing is we're just taking out 3 of them. We bought this thing for $375, by the way. It's in Hoodsport on the water.
I love it out there.
Yeah. So why do we have all the problems that we do? Because we bought this thing for peanuts. I mean, literally, this fixed and operating correctly, this is worth about $1.2 million. My broker, who's also a partner on this, thinks $1.5 million. I think that's rosy, but either way, somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million is what this thing is worth fixed. Fixing a drain field is not a big deal. I mean, it's a large project, but it is a doable project that anyone can get knocked out. You get the engineering, the professionals come in, they dig it up, they replace it. It's a fairly simple project. As
from your end,
from my end, as projects go for hiring other people to do stuff, it is a doable project. The amount of unknowns are limited to a certain price range. Like some point, they've redone the drain field 3 times. There is a way to do your project. We come in, fix drain field, bring it down 25 units, project done. That was something that we had to watch, though, is almost all of them are on septic. It's rare to have mobile. I've seen them on sewer, of course, but a lot of these mobile home parks are going to be on septic. Look at the septic first. A lot of them are on wells. get to know your well. If you have no water or no sewage abilities at your property, you're dead in the water. Your deal's done. So on a maintenance
You're
standpoint,
dead with no water.
Yeah, exactly. You're dead with no water. You really want to make sure that those things, like you want to watch the utilities, because at the end of the day, a lot of these are just the lot rent. Like utilities is like 80% of what your project is maintaining the functionality of the pad for whoever lives there.
Well, so that's where maintenance comes into play.
Yeah.
And it's really important to determine and know with your mobile home park if you are buying all of the homes or if all the homes are already owned.
Yes. Park owned versus
park owned versus privately owned homes is a huge factor, because if the park owns the homes, you own the maintenance, which just means that if do you guys own the homes at the one on Hoodsport?
We do. We own all
Right.
but I think 3.
So what really happened is they just bought 25 single family homes all located in a small space.
Correct.
Every single one of them has a furnace. Every single one of them has a water heater. Every single one of them has their own circuit breaker panel. And guess who's responsible for all those windows and all those roofs?
Us, until you sell or finance all these to your tenants. But we'll get there later.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the important thing to realize when you're buying a mobile home park with park owned homes. You're essentially buying a whole series of single family homes all in one location, which is great. We can save you money as a contractor. We can drop price, because if I'm doing 5 furnaces and 5 mobile homes and I can walk between them, I can probably get you a better deal buying in bulk.
Yes.
But as far as maintenance items, what he already covered. I mean, as the mobile home park operator, what are your real liabilities? You have a septic field, you have sewer, water, trash, and electricity.
Yep.
That's and drivability. You don't have a mud field, so you got a little bit of landscaping too. So you just have to look at those items and see how things are set up. So it depends on how the power is distributed throughout the park. Do you have a central meter bank, and then power leaves the meter bank and goes to each home? Where does it hit the master meter for the park, and where is it individually metered?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we've worked with a couple of mobile home parks on is, hey, look, if you can separately meter and each spot, it costs quite a bit more in some of the legwork and permitting, but getting the meter into the tenant's responsibility and getting the actual meter location, if it's allowed by code, into the space of that mobile home.
Yep.
Means that you can pass the liability for most of the electrical straight onto the tenant.
Yep.
And that's huge, because that's one more thing off your plate that you don't have to manage anymore.
And it's a lot easier to pass through utilities than it is to raise rent. For whatever the psychology is behind that, just so much easier. You go, okay, we're not raising rent this year. However, you guys are now responsible for electric, or you're now responsible for water. Whatever it is, when you can pass through the bills, pass-through bills are easier to get accepted than, hey, I'm raising your rent $25. You can pass through $100 a month of utility bills to them, and there's rarely a question.
Have you been read of that Dion strategy?
I have not, but I know that is pretty consistent.
Yeah. What do we got for next?
Dylan, podcast. Okay, this is a good, just general one, but I love this. Podcast recommendations or books you recommend to learn about maintenance.
There's not a lot of books for maintenance.
Sadly,
I got some from the 1970s. My granddad gave me.
Really,
a book on home maintenance tells you. That's I think that's one of the only times in print I've ever seen the sacrificial anode of a water heater mentioned.
Really?
Like, it's not even in the maintenance manual for some of these appliances. But
that's because they want them to fail, so you replace them, right?
Right, because everything's built with, it's built to be replaced in short order.
Yep.
And so what you're going to do if you want a book or you want to read about the maintenance, every single appliance you buy, and a furnace and a water heater both count as appliances. Same with a hot tub, an air conditioner, a refrigerator, a stove, or whatever you want to call it. There is always a homeowner's manual for these things. And it says, hey, here's your recommended maintenance for as a homeowner. Getting into the more advanced maintenance, you got to talk to somebody in that trade. I'm a resource. I'm actually trying to work with this guy over here and create a course on that, on maintenance and on HVAC and training, because I get this question a lot. Every time I talk to these guys, I was like, where do I go to learn more? And I'm like, shoot me an email.
Also, what's a sacrificial anode?
Oh, sacrificial anode. It's this cool little thing that hangs out in your water heater. So your water heater is made of steel, right? So steel rusts when you put water to it.
Oh.
It rusts even more when you put a heat into that water, right? So anytime you have a temperature differential of greater than 20 degrees Celsius, and you have a fluid medium of conducting electricity, and you have more than one type of metal in an entire system, you create galvanic corrosion.
Which basically every system is going to have at least two types of metal, right?
Right, because you're going to have mild steel and stainless steel and copper and and galvanized piping, and you're going to end up with 4 or 5 different metals. Brass, most of your shower valves are brass now that I think about it. So you're going to end up with about 4 or 5 dissimilar metals in any plumbing system, even one that's run with PEX. You still end up with metal pieces in the system at various points. Your water hammer arresters for where your fridge plugs into.
Yep.
The whole lines are PEX. That's great. But we have brass over here and we have stainless steel over here. You're going to conduct a couple of millivolts. You're going to cause corrosion. So what the sacrificial anode does is in anytime you have a battery or an electrical system, you have a cathode and an anode, right? And the anode gets eaten up. It's what breaks down. So it's made out of a weaker metal. Usually it's a mixture of like magnesium, manganese, potassium, a couple other things, a couple alloys. I know potassium's flammable in water. There's a couple of alloys that they mix in there. But it's the real thing is it's weaker than the metals commonly used in plumbing. And so what happens is the corrosion that occurs, it'll pull off the sacrificial anode. So if you do
sacrificial,
hence the term sacrificial anode, because it's an anode and it's designed to be sacrificed. So when you create that electrical current, your other end, and this is the fun science to get to learn. The other part, right? So you have an anode and a cathode.
Yep.
And you have little bits of metal electroplating off the anode onto the cathode. So you're actually physically moving the metal, and it's an electroplating process that you're actually breaking down the metal over here, and it is being replated an atom at a time over here on the cathode.
Interesting.
So you can actually have a buildup in it. It's one of the problems with galvanized piping. In your water heater, if you drain it every year, which check your owner's manual, water heaters are supposed to be drained every year. Hook a hose to the bottom, hit the valve, drain stuff out. You'll notice that there's a bunch of like white, junky sediment. That's a mixture of two things. That's a mixture of either the remnants of your sacrificial anode that fell down and didn't have, weren't able to be plated over to the cathode. And so they just collected on the bottom of your water heater. So it's essentially oxides of metal. So it'll rust things, which is why we drain it. And then you'll sometimes have byproducts of if you have hard water. So if you have really hard water, you can form
I do here.
Right, what you do here. You can get little calcium pieces that'll form inside the water heater because of exposure to heat and the chemicals in the water system. And you're inducing electric current across it. So you get some really cool chemical reactions, and you have to drain those out. That sediment, we just call it sediment as a general term. And you got to drain that out every year, or it will build up, and it will get to a point where it's impacting the ability of the water heater to function properly.
Okay, so question.
Yeah.
So we have our water heater, we have our sacrificial anode. We have to drain the water heaters. Most people should know that, and if you don't, now you do.
Exactly.
And of course, I always forget, but you drain your water heaters. At some point, the sacrificial anode gets fully sacrificed, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
how long do we have on these? How
7
often
to 10 years.
Okay.
So you get about 7 to 10 years. Some manufacturers are like, oh, it's a lifetime anode. No, it's not. No, it is not. No, sir. The cool part is the anodes are only about $50 to $100 at Home Depot.
Oh, okay.
And supplyhouse.com and a couple other places. You can buy one of the. You can buy the anode for cheap. You need like an 1.1 inch socket. And I found out that you cannot put it on a socket wrench because it doesn't have the torque. You have to manually hand crank it. Yeah. And you need a socket with a breaker bar on it to get that thing loose usually. because at the factory they Loctite them in place.
Ah,
And so, Loctite's that grippy chemical that holds threads together really well. It is not like the plumber's tape that is what you should be applying to the threads. They use Loctite because they don't want you to mess with it unless you're a trained professional.
interesting.
But yeah, so you have to crank that thing, and it's a big old socket. If you ever look at the top of your water heater, it's steel, right? And then there's a couple of these little like white plug caps that are about yay big. They're about yay big around. And it's underneath those. You just lift it out. Usually there's 3 to 4 of them. And you got to figure, sometimes it's fun, depending on the manufacturer, you have to figure out which one's which. One's a sacrificial anode. Sometimes one's a drain plug or a test port. And one is just for filling the urethane foam around the heat exchanger.
Interesting. Okay. So what happens when we take a sacrificial anode and it's fully worn down? We haven't replaced it in the 7-10 years. Once it's gone, what happens to your water heater?
So then what's going to happen is across your plumbing system, the weakest metal, and this goes way back to high school chemistry, and we start talking about like the electron rings and covalent bonds.
Yeah.
And we start talking about how many free electrons are at the end of each metal. And we get into talking about different types of metal. And so it's really going to depend on your system, but it's probably going to be your stainless. It's probably going to be either the nickel or the chromium, and the stainless is going to start peeling first.
Okay.
And it's going to end up plating onto the copper pretty quickly. And usually after your anode's dead, 2 years, maybe 3 before you have a lovely flooded garage or flooded middle of your house or whatever, because it's just going to eat away at the inside. And usually wherever your water heater gets the hottest. So if you have a gas-fired water heater, the hottest part is always at the bottom. It's always going to be like 400 or 500 degrees. Like just one part is going to be that hot. And that one part that's got the most heat is going to be the wear point where it's just going to...
Interesting.
And so that's why you get water heaters that have like little tiny leaks in them.
Yeah.
So every time you get a home inspection, they see that your water heater is 14 years old. What does the home inspector say?
This needs to be replaced. Generally.
Right. That they say that every time.
Yep.
And it's like, oh no, you don't have to replace that. We can just maintenance that. We can just drain it, check your anode. If it's bad, drop a new one in. And it takes maybe an hour to do the longest part of the whole maintenance on a water heater is draining the thing.
What does a water heater cost today? Let's say average house. Let's just use basics.
An average house has a 40 to 50 gallon water heater.
Yep.
Plumbers around the country, Washington State, you're going to pay about $2,000. I've seen pricing from $1,600. I've seen pricing at $3,000 for your standard 40 to 50 gallon water heater. And that's pretty consistent across the country. If you go to Home Depot and you look, they're going to be anywhere from $500 to $800 on the shelf, unless you start talking about a heat pump hot water heater. And then those get crazy expensive depending on what models you go with.
So here's how you make a lot of money in real estate, or by doing your maintenance. Now, if you have your own single family house and every 10 to 15 years you end up replacing your water heater because you got lazy, you didn't do the maintenance, whatever, you're out $2,000. If you're someone who makes $100,000 a year, it's like, okay, well, that's fine. You have a 200 unit portfolio. Every decade, you have to allocate $400,000 to these if you're not replacing, or roughly every 5 to 7 years, you're allocating $400,000 right there. And this is one basic maintenance item.
This is a basic maintenance item that should be checked in every unit that you own every year. You just check the thing. It doesn't take very long. And you're talking about being able to save, you said 100 units.
Yeah, or
200 units
for me,
right?
Yeah.
400 grand, right? When you take a water heater life from 10 years to 30 years, that's 2 replacements. So really, that's $800,000 that you're going to save. It's almost $1 million over 30 years of ownership of that one portfolio and that one property. And when you talk about how much does the individual maintenance for something like that cost, I mean, on my plan, you're going to spend $60,000 a year. So. You're going to end up saving a lot of money in the meantime. No, it's not even $60,000 a year. It's less than that. Yeah, because you can hire a dedicated maintenance guy for $42,000 a year and have him do nothing but go swap out or go check water heaters every day.
Yeah.
Right? There's 220 working days in a year. All right, buddy, we're going to salary you at 40 grand a year. All you got to do is take care of one water heater a day.
Yeah. For those who just joined, by the way, so the things that we've mentioned so far, we've talked about a lot about water heaters because those are just easy to save money on. We've talked about, oh man, we had one other good one in here that you mentioned early. I'm trying to remember what it was. We haven't even got to HVAC or bath fans because those are easy ones that just like rack up money.
Dryer vents.
Oh
God.
Man. Okay, let's talk dryer vents for a second because I just had a clogged dryer vent and then simultaneously a washing machine that died, and I've had all the things. To the extent I hate these so much, by the way, that I do not do any in-unit washers dryers. I will nix those as soon as possible. I hate them.
Do a common one. Do a coin op.
Yep.
And charge the tenants a couple extra bucks.
Yep. Do a coin op and have it serviced by someone else, and that's the easy way to do it.
Yeah.
But what comes up? My first building has in-unit washer and dryer shared. It's one common space owned by 2 tenants. It's not coin op. It's just it's in the basement. It's a basic thing. What can we do? Dryer vents. How do we save money? How do we avoid fire? There's a bunch of. No one does this, by the way. No one. I've never bought a property where I didn't get into the dryer vents and be like, what the heck? Usually they blow it underneath the house or they blow it into the ceiling. That is where I've seen most of it go, or it doesn't go anywhere. It just lives under the house as a fire hazard, or above the house as a fire hazard.
This is why we can't have nice things like this right here. Dryer vents are supposed to go to the exterior of the home.
Yes.
Somewhere. Exterior of the building somewhere. And bigger commercial buildings, they blow it on the roof.
Yeah.
And why? Because the wind will take away the stuff. The real thing is every year, you have got to clean out your dryer vent. Every year. What happens? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I got a bridge in Arizona to sell you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. You sell or finance it even.
Oh, there we go.
I'll hold the note. Dryer vents have a max of 35 feet long.
Okay.
And that includes elbows, and every elbow counts as 5 feet.
Mm.
So which means that dryer vents are typically very short.
Yes.
Your standard hose on a shop vac, the standard hose length is 6 feet, and the extension pieces are 18 inches. You can very easily buy a couple extra pieces and just vacuum out your dryer vents with a shop vac. It's quick, it's easy, it's relatively painless, and it will save you a lot of time and money. If you want to be technical about the right way to do things, you disconnect the dryer, you take a dryer vent brush, which is basically just a brush that's, the bristles are like this big.
Yeah.
And they squish down into it, and you just shove that sucker through. And
like cleaning the barrel of a gun.
Just like cleaning your barrels. You shove it through. It's flexible enough. It can usually handle a whole bunch of bends. So usually you can actually shove it all the way through and through.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just, stand at one end and run the vacuum. Or what I've done a lot of times is I'll start on the inside. I'll set my vacuum up on the outside, and I'll just push towards my vacuum.
Yeah.
And then when the vacuum starts making a hell of a racket, I know that I've fed my broom into it.
Oh, there we go.
But what happens with your dryers when you don't clean out your dryer vent? So your dryers are going to operate somewhere around 200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah. That's
180 to 200 a lot of times is what they're designed for. There are limit safety switches that usually engage somewhere right in that level. So you'll have a 210 to a 240 degree limit switch. And what a limit switch is, it's something that stops your dryer from working if it gets too warm.
Mm.
So if your dryer is overheating, or if your dryer is not drying your clothes out, or a lot of people call us when it's like, oh, hey, yeah, my dryer, it doesn't seem to be heating very well. It's my clothes are still a little bit wet after an hour. This hasn't happened before. Well, $5 says your dryer vent is clogged.
Yeah.
And the dryer, right? Your dryer pulls air in from the room it's in, and it blows air out through the tube. It exhausts air from your house, but it's got to heat it up in the middle. Well, if that air can't go anywhere, then it's not really pulling in a whole lot of air. It can't dry your clothes out.
Exactly.
So you get tenant problems and tenant complaints, and what will end up happening is they'll run it. No one will fix it. And bam, your dryer heating element goes out. And I used to make so much money going on Craigslist And everybody's like, oh, my dryer's broken, got a new one. Come take this one away. It's free. I could 9 times out of 10, I could go get that dryer, pop open the bottom, pop out the heating element and test it and be like, oh, yeah, pops heating element, smack a new one in for $80 and turn around and sell that thing for $300-400 as a used dryer.
There we go.
And it's people are like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, I used to flip dryers.
Side hustle people. There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what you're looking for.
One of my clients out here took my recommendations on washers and dryers, and for a couple of years, they would just line up. They had about 40 spares, and once all the spares went out and all the broken ones were in there, they'd line them up. They'd pay me for one day and be like, "You've got 1 day. I'll pay you your going rate. I want you to diagnose every single one of these." He had them in a little shop, and I went through and I would diagnose and/or repair about 40 units in a day.
Wow.
Because that was his way of saving money. Because I think they had like 300 and something doors. And so it was like, well, he's got 40 broken washers and dryers, and you just hook them up, set them up, and let them rip. So yeah, you just go through and check. And 9 times out of 10, your dryers are breaking because the dryer vent gets blocked.
Yep.
Or if people don't clean the lint trap. Very rarely do you have like a drum and belt failure or anything like that.
That makes sense to me. Now, What is the actual cost of, like, what does that save you? In potential.
What does it save you? Well, a lot of headache, honestly. It doesn't save you a huge amount of money. Dryers at the end of the day, $700 to $1,000 plus whatever the delivery fee is from Home Depot or Best Buy or whoever your supplier is. You can probably even get a cheap dryer for $400. That really depends on you. So like at the end of the day, it's not having to buy a $400 dryer or $1,000 dryer, and it's not dealing with the tenant headaches, and it's not dealing with the constant complaints. So what it really the question at some point becomes, at what point is the extra money and maintenance worth your peace of mind?
Yeah. To
not have these issues. And that's a fair question to ask that, we sometimes talk about is, well, is it worth the time it takes you to do it, Christian?
And often the answer is no.
Often the answer is no.
And sometimes it's yes, but that's why you build the right teams and the right systems. Like, we're getting better and better at stuff. Early in this call, we were talking about rebates for stuff. Like, that's just, I never do that. I never do it. And it's,
well, you guys are about to do the 24 unit hotel conversion, right?
Yep.
You guys pulling a permit on that, right?
Yep.
Why hasn't anybody called me and said, "Hey, Jonny, we've talked to the utility and here's the rebates we're going to get for redoing that place"?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'll take that as my phone call.
Yep.
I'll have the office. All of my people will get a hold of your people. We'll figure it out next week.
Yeah, and I have to figure out what our total project is there. Insurance is quoting stuff out right now. Right now we're in remediation phase. I don't think there's any rebates for ripping shit out, but there will be probably for putting all the stuff back in.
There's not for ripping it out. There is for the total project if you up the energy efficiency.
Yep.
And that is that's not just statewide, because there are the good old IRA tax credit mill that Uncle Joe passed a couple of years ago. Then that Inflation Reduction Act. There are so many credits in there for heat pumps and energy efficiency items. It is a literal gold mine. Like, you have to pour through some of the arbitrary crap, but there is a literal gold mine of, oh yes, if you replace your water heater with a heat pump hot water heater, there's a $1,600 IRA tax credit for that. For every water heater you replace with a heat pump hot water heater, there's like a $1,600 tax credit. For every furnace or every heat pump that gets installed, there's a tax credit rebate for that. It comes off on your taxes. So there's a lot of money that you can make on the back end in limiting your taxable liability. If you just talk to the right people about energy efficiency, talk to your utility company about the rebates they're going to give you.
Speaking of rebates, so I have a 15 unit. We've already replaced a couple of the windows here and there, but almost all the windows are failed, and they're huge windows. They're big old giant windows.
Are they single pane? Are they double pane?
The ones that we're replacing are all failed single pane windows.
Okay.
When we go through and do, because some of them we've kind of just replaced as a one-off because we had to. A lot of them are just failing. It's like, okay, at some point we need to come in and do a sweep of, okay, everything that has been replaced, we're probably taking out. I'm going to say we're probably taking out 2 very sizable windows per year. So we have 30 of these things that are going to be replaced. What do rebates look like that? How does one even apply for these?
So you go to your local rebate companies, your local utilities rebate page. So your local utility is always going to have a rebate page. They are required by law to offer rebates. Every single one of them does. Even if they offer, $10 off on a thermostat, they have to have a rebate page. So what they'll have is you'll go to that. They'll usually have a phone number or they'll have an email, and that's for commercial multifamily and big commercial projects. There's going to be a separate team that handles that, or there might be just a separate person who handles that. And there's going to be like, a name at, PSE or, Snowpud or,
Grant County PUD.
Grant County PUD. There's going to be somebody's name at Grant County PUD, and I guarantee you say, hey, I own this building. We need to replace, we're looking at doing an energy efficiency upgrade and replacing window. What rebates do you have available for this energy efficiency upgrade? And they'll be like, oh, you want to do an efficiency upgrade? Great. What are you doing? And they will probably send you over a sheet for the year for that utility company that says, hey, they will pay or give you back either this percentage or this many as a flat rate per unit, per unit installed for whatever item it is. And it's always backed by state grants, federal grants, some money that they're required by law to set aside. And then sometimes some of them are good enough that they even have like a little checkbox about like, oh yeah, this is eligible for, your Inflation Reduction Act credits. So as far as the rebate side of things go, there's going to be a human at the other end that you're going to have to email.
Okay, and it's almost always with the PUD or local energy company.
It's with the local energy company.
Perfect.
100% of the time, all of the rebate programs are done through the energy company.
Yeah.
Even the ones passed by the state and they get passed in the state legislature, it's the utility company who's actually administering those rebates.
That makes sense. And now Cody and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars more renovations than we thought we were going to have last year. So that was kind of a bummer. However, what we were looking at with you last year, and this ties right into the rebate question. You're Tacoma Heating and Furnace. Like you are, with all of your skills, at the end of the day, you are the master of HVAC.
Right. What
sort of rebates do we look at if we're going from, because a lot of these buildings we do value add multifamily. So I buy a lot of stuff, 50s, 60s, 70s, as old as 1911. And we're coming in and we're changing the heating on these, switching to things like mini splits. What sort of rebates are available if you're going from like a super inefficient, let's say we're going from wall heaters to mini splits.
Okay.
What money can be saved?
So wall heaters, your basic electric heat. In fact, any kind of electric heat.
Yeah.
It's efficient at a rate of what we call 3.414. It's a measurement of BTUs per watts. On the heating side of things, we call it the HSPF, or heating seasonal performance factor. On every heat pump, you're going to see this rating. You're going to see a SEER and an HSPF.
Yeah.
And the SEER rating is going to be like double what the HSPF is. But they're the same thing. A SEER is for cooling mode. HSPF is for heating mode. The federal requirement for HSPF2 to be rebate qualified at a minimum, the federal standard minimum for installation is 7 in this region. And sorry, I'm like scrolling through the tabs in my brain here. And the minimum rebate qualified usually starts in somewhere around 8, 7.5 to 8 HSPF2 is normally your minimum to start getting rebates. The higher the number, obviously better. So like Mitsubishi, Daikin, Gree, a couple others, they have a couple of lines that are designed for colder climates. Like we would put, so if we were going to take one of your projects out in Grant County, you guys are way colder than it is here in Seattle. You guys get down to 0 degrees out there. So we would be putting in, right, it gets cold. So we'd be putting in like a hyperheat unit that can get down to, that can be full capacity to -5.
Yeah.
They have an HSPF2 rating, usually of about 10 to 11. Well, your electric heat is 3.414. Your heat pump is 10 to 11. So you're three and a half times more efficient in terms of energy usage. When we then go to the utility company, if you were a single family home, your rebate would usually be anywhere from $600 to $1,200.
Yeah.
And like, I think we worked out the deal with you guys. It was somewhere around 5 or 6. I think it was $6,000 with electrical per unit for most of your portfolio. It was somewhere in that range. So like if it was done a single family, you're only going to get like a 10 to maybe 20% rebate. Well, when we've reached out to on multifamily projects, and we've even done a few portfolios, we've gotten as much as 35% back,
which is just huge.
And the other thing is, every one of these units, make sure you talk to your contractor. If you get an IRA rebate qualified unit, you get another $1,200 from the federal government for every one of these you put in. So not only are you going to get your out of your $6,000 cost, not only are you going to get like $2,000 to probably about $2,000 a unit back, you're then going to get $1,200 from the federal government back. So really, your true cost of doing the work is $3,000, $2,800. So you're almost paying half price,
which starts to make sense. One of the strategies that we have that we talk about a lot on this channel is we want to create a unit that is nicer than every unit around it. And you don't want to be way nicer. You want to be nicer than every other place that you could rent next door. And you want to come in at slightly lower price to rent. If you can cut down their utility costs, assuming you're passing through electric to them, everyone else has crappy wall heaters that are horrible to heat. You have these hot spots and these ugly heaters all around your place. You swap that out with a mini split that can heat and cool your place like that, especially in affordable apartments where you're talking like 600 square feet.
And you only need one unit for something that size.
Exactly. Super easy to heat and cool. It looks way nicer. It has a remote. They're easy to program. You've now created cost effectively a nicer space than your competition. If you happen to be in the building where you're paying utilities, you've just cut your personal utilities down a ton.
Yeah. I mean, you took 30%. Like we've done it before I had a guy out in Arizona, Nebraska, that I helped engineer a project for 50 units.
Yep.
He was paying the electric utility for these guys, and he was paying some ungodly amount for air conditioning because they had window shakers, and window shakers are terribly inefficient. When we talk about the SEER rating, because it's cooling side and it was Arizona, they're efficient around like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Mini splits are like 22 to 24 SEER.
Oh.
So it was legitimately 3 times the efficiency. So we put him in for him, and I mean his bill went from, I think it was like 12 or 14,000 in electricity a month in the summer to like 3 or 4,000. He saved almost $10,000 a month on the electric bill.
Well, then imagine you're somewhere like Robin Hood Village Resort, where of course you're not passed through electric to your tenants. Your tenants are nightly guests. That would be insane.
So
your electric bill is your own. And Union doesn't get that cold typically, but our first year owning it, we got absolutely pounded with snow, the most we've seen in 50 years. We had the highest tide also that we've seen in 50 years. The highest rainfall that we'd seen there in 50 years. I mean, we got everything that could go wrong did go wrong. But like the amount of power it takes just to keep your stuff warm enough not to freeze over is substantial. Like our electric bill is really high, especially in the winter. Summer, we bring out our window units for some of the things. Now, some of them have mini splits, and one of them you've installed. So I have 3 cabins that have mini splits. I have another 15 cabins that are heated the old way. That's the type of project that you do where it's like one of the best things you can do. Granted, it's not for $3,000 a unit. It's not free, but dollar per dollar, one of the best things you can do to automatically increase your NOI.
Right.
You bring down those utility expenses. You can show that on the actual report. Like, hey, our utilities are less. Your net operating income goes up. Your property is now just worth more. Your your actual amount that you're allowed to borrow, the amount of net worth that you have on your balance sheet goes up substantially because we have a better building. It's going to be that insurance is that much happier with it, especially going from wall heaters to mini splits.
Fire risk drops
substantially
to near nil with the mini splits.
And so you could reduce your insurance, you reduce utilities, increase NOI, increase value. These are some of the things that you can do in your portfolio to make millions of dollars. They're not completely free, but there are all sorts of ways to make these more affordable, which is where Jonny really shines.
Right. So when I first got into the energy efficiency sphere and started dabbling into it back in 2010, 2012, especially in the commercial space, the three top items were lights and electrical and getting everything to LEDs. And they were massive rebates. At one point, PSE, when I was working with CBRE, PSE was offering 90% rebates to commercial buildings to swap out their all their big old halogen 4-foot tubes, swap all those out to LEDs, and they were offering a 90% rebate. So when I was working for CBRE, I was working on the Key Bank contract, and so the Key Bank building in downtown Tacoma, I actually did the math and the engineering on what it was going to save them. And I brought in the electricians and whatnot, and we all sat down and got the numbers cranked out.
I didn't know you worked for CBRE.
I did. I worked for CBRE for about 9 months when I was first came out here.
They were one of my biggest clients back in the CoStar days.
Yeah, CBRE's great.
Yeah, sold them a $16 million in year contract for data. Which, to be fair, is a ridiculous discount for the amount of places that they have. But they pay a lot of money to the CoStar Group.
I bet they do.
That costs a little bit more than your HVAC.
Yeah, no, they're we maintained for Key Bank this plaza in downtown Tacoma. It's 3 stories tall. It's got most of their headquarters office space, and it was going to be a $1.2 million project, and PSU was going to pick up 90%. And this was 2016 when I did this one, and they were going to pick up 90% of the cost to convert that building over to LEDs all the way through.
Wow.
The property manager said, no, I don't think we can do it this year. We don't want to spend the CapEx budget. I'm like, wait a minute. The energy savings had it where it was going to get paid back in like 2.5 years.
Isn't that crazy?
It was because they only had to pay 10%. They only had to pay like $100,000, and it was somewhere it was going to save them 35 or 40 grand a year.
Yeah. Now another building that I would look at, I was just thinking like good user for this. Like the best building that I could put that in is something like our 38plex, where the entire property, all 38 units, is master metered. You can do utility bill backs. I really don't do any RUBS programs, but you can just do a general piece of math for, okay, we have 1 beds, we got 2 beds. 2 beds are going to use a little bit more electricity than 1 beds. What did we actually spend in utilities last year? And you can just kind of do the math and you can add it to a lease. That's what we typically do is we spend about this per year. So you have your portion of the utilities is built in, and that's something that you can do to save, to basically go, hey, we're master metered.
Those are great places to rent back in the Bitcoin mining days.
Oh, yes. You know? Oh, yes. And they come in and just jack up the electric. I got fixed pricing. But you can take those master meter properties. Those are the ones where it's like, man, usually you're the one responsible for the bill ultimately. If you can take that and reduce those expenses.
We can increase your net operating income, bring valuation to the project, and make it cash flow way sooner.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or it makes it that much faster to refinance. You know, like, look, we took utilities from X to Y. And they're like, well, how did you do that? And you can show them invoices. Like, we did these renovations and these renovations. Right. And they're like, oh, okay, that's legitimate. Your expenses are less. Your net operating income is higher.
Yep. And all you got to do is hand me the utility bill, and you can show it with the utility bill before and after pretty easily.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a good question here in the chat. Can you talk about how you manage to do maintenance on your Texas properties while out of state? I can. You have to hire a good property manager who has good contacts, and you actually have to screen a lot of their contacts yourself. And in many cases, I dictate to all of my property managers, these are, for the properties that we have, what we want to work with. Like I have preferred vendors, and I give them my preferred vendor list and who I like to work with. A lot of property managers, this is why I always say don't use a property manager who doesn't own property. If they're a property manager and they don't own their own buildings, they're going to hire whoever was the nicest rep or whoever that's their friend's friend. Like, oh, I think this person's really good. It happens almost every single time. But if you own properties and you worked with people who are like, I really like this person, and then they do work for you and you're like, I really don't like their work. You know that really quick. You don't recommend them to your clients. But I've seen that happen so many times, so many places. The PMs who do not own properties are just not capable of running a property like an owner because they're not an owner. They're a service provider and you just can't do it. Then there's something to be said for Jonny. Jonny is an investor. Like Johnny's done projects. He's done his own projects. You've had wins. You've had losses. You've gone through everything that every other investor's had to do. You understand the game. You understand the expenses. It's different.
Very.
I like playing with people who play the game. I don't need you to own 200 units to be my service provider. But man, if you're my property management company and you own, a couple of duplexes yourself, I'm like, you're going to treat my 38plex differently than someone who doesn't own any real estate at all. Just realistic. Right. And that's across the board, every single service.
Yeah. You also need somebody who's hired maintenance personnel before. Because property management's like it's an in thing, and I've seen a lot of real estate agents being like, oh yeah, I'm going to jump into property management, and it's like, have you ever done property management before?
Property management is hard and the margins are low. Yeah, I don't recommend it to anyone unless you own real estate and you're like, I'm trying to do this, or you have some other competitive advantage. I've seen contractors before come in and start their own PM company because they already have the maintenance arm, and vice versa. I've seen maintenance or property management companies start a maintenance arm, and they usually partner up with someone and they expand their company that way. I've seen this done multiple times. You can merge, you can add synergies, but generally speaking, if you're not really, really, really good at hiring and managing contractors, stuff is going to be an absolute mess. I can say this for a fact. Jonny is the smartest and best tech I've worked with in almost any industry. Jonny is also, if I could say this, not the best scheduler of all time. Is that fair to say? Is that okay?
That's why I brought on my business partner, because I can't schedule for shit.
Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. If I had to choose one, I would like to have someone to be competent. But my wife, Danny, is the one in our company who manages contractors. If something doesn't go to schedule or if we have a question, how fast is Danny all over your phone? Generally speaking, realistically.
The minute I'm late.
You want to
I'm late the next day, the day after that, the day after that. If I still haven't gotten to it the day after that.
If you have that person in your PM company, they can manage a contractor. And every single contractor will have their strengths and have their weaknesses. You want someone on your team who knows how to work with every individual contractor. I have a team who does the renovations faster, better, and cheaper than anyone else in our portfolio. They also forget to invoice for months at a time. And it is really hard when you get a bunch of bills and you're like, did they actually do this work? When was this? What was this for? They're bad at invoicing, which in my opinion is the worst thing you can do as a business owner. If you suck at bringing in the income after you do the work, that is the stupidest. It pisses me off. I have a wife who manages these contractors who goes like, hey, I already know this bill's coming. It's in my notebook. I'm ready for this. Of course, we're not going to call them and remind them to bill us right now. We get free money right now. Well, we're going to wait 2 or 3 months until they remember. But when it comes in, she's made sure that Cody and I don't spend that money. It's been sidelined and she knows where it's at. That's the level of property management that you want to have. She knows every property manager's strength, every maintenance person's strength, all of their weaknesses. She knows what to expect. She knows when to be on them, when to lay off of them, which usually is never.
Fair.
And she gets it done. That's what you want to see in your property management company. That's what Danny brings to our team. Everyone, no one's perfect at everything. It's just realistic, but that's what you look for in a strong PM on the maintenance side. What is your maintenance plan? Who do you work with? And what do you do I like to give a couple of example situations of like, okay, I've had this happen to a property. What would you do in this situation? And I just want to test what their answer is. So before you hire a PM, keep that in mind. In Texas, that's what we do. I usually hire out. By I mean Danny and I hire out a lot of our contractors ourselves, and we just coordinate them with the property manager. Danny basically GCs a lot of our projects from here in Washington, just making sure everyone is there on time, sending pictures, and everything is running smoothly. It is hard to do that task well. I happen to have someone on my team who I happen to be married to is very good at it.
So get yourself a Danny.
So get yourself a Danny. And if you don't have one,
lesson here.
Find a property management company who has one. And usually if you ask them like who on your team is the one who stays on contractors, when they have someone, they're like, oh, it's this person. They're amazing. If they're like, oh yeah, no, we have a few dedicated reps and we're very good at this. I'm like, oh, they don't have a Danny. You can hear it pretty quick.
Yeah.
Favorite markets in Texas. Oh, well, I can certainly share this one. Favorite markets in Texas. I actually am liking the border towns right now. While we're going to be stupid and let everyone in, at the end of the day, you're doing housing for humans. So Laredo, McAllen, places that are getting flooded with too many people, you're seeing rents go up. Now, do they have their own problems? Yes. Are there elevated crime in these areas? Also, yes. But if you buy in the right areas of those markets, they're like where it's just like, oh man, population's a little out of whack. They've also done really well. The border towns have done extremely well economically during COVID. There's been a lot of problems with shipping. Stuff's been rerouted into the other ports. And so areas like Laredo, Texas, and McAllen, Texas, that get a lot of traffic through them, they've done really well in shipping and manufacturing. And there's a lot of jobs down there that have been really good. So I'm looking at stable job growth. Border is actually kind of rock right now. I also like pretty much anything in the DFW area. I think Austin has been tapped out. They have had such a huge run. They're really inflated. I'm not usually scared of that, but I think in their market cycle, they're at their end of their run. The areas around Austin are still fairly fantastic. San Antonio has a lot of benefits. If you go up the highway between Dallas and Austin, Waco's pretty much smack dab in the middle. Waco's doing really well. Fantastic market. There's a lot of places in Texas that are excellent, but you really just want to track where are the jobs going, where are the people going. I mean, that's true of any market. DFW is still expanding like crazy. I love the markets up and around it, especially north of Dallas. So there you go. That's basically my whole thing on the state. Houston's weird. Houston has a ton of opportunity. It's one of those markets that you can buy on one street and it's a great neighborhood, and you can go one block over and it's a terrible neighborhood. If you don't have boots on the ground, I wouldn't even say property management. I would say if you don't have partners who live in that area who can tell you this street, not this street, I wouldn't try to go out of state and invest in Houston. You can make a killing. Insurance is going to be high. And the geography of that town is really wonky. There's just dangerous areas and nice areas, and they're all just like checkerboarded right together. So that's a weird one.
What makes the areas dangerous?
There's a few things. A big thing is just a weird spread of rich versus poor. You have areas that just had a ton of renovation and like revived areas.
Yep.
Right in the middle of things that were slums that haven't converted all the way.
Yep.
In my experience, and I'm sorry, Houston, because I actually do love that city. My sister lives there. I have seen throughout Texas, race issues are more prevalent in Houston than they are in other areas of Texas. You have areas that are very much segregated where like this is not an okay place for white people to be. It's more dangerous, and vice versa. You just see more racial tension in Houston than I've seen in the rest of Texas. That's me personally. There are some areas where my sister's like, you can't go there. You do not look like the people there. You will get mugged. And they're just bars that are like, oh, this is a happening place, just not for you. I'm like, okay. I've only ever experienced that in Houston. I haven't experienced that in Dallas. I haven't experienced that in Austin.
Bless your heart. Oh, bless.
That has just been my experience. So that's stuff that you deal with in Houston that is like realistic.
It's not just Houston, brother.
Oh, I know. I haven't run into
I'm from the South. It happens in pockets in Virginia and in North Carolina.
South Carolina, Georgia, even parts of Florida.
Oh yeah, no, it's everywhere. But I've experienced it to a greater level going through. I'm in Dallas a lot. I don't see that. I don't feel that in Dallas.
Is very metropolitan,
like
area.
I do in Houston, though. You're in Houston, which are also quite metropolitan, and it's like I'm like you feel it there a little different than you do some of the other major metros in Houston, or sorry, in Texas.
Right.
Which has been my boy. I noticed it in Virginia. It's Seattle, we just don't have a lot of that here. Like, you come from out of state in Virginia. I'm like, this is not cool.
I got some stories about driving through Anacostia around DC in the middle of the night in the early 2000, like 2000, 2001, driving around in my little chipbox Toyota, playing country music, getting bullet holes on my car.
Yeah.
Driving through the hood at 2:00 in the morning.
We try not to get too political here, but every market has their problems. Seattle's problem is we encourage fentanyl use heavily in our cities. We rewrite the laws to make it comfortable, to make it legal, to make it supported, to make it free.
So bad here.
Yeah, every market has their problems. Seattle is a port with rampant drug use, and we have a ton of human trafficking that runs through the port of Seattle. We're one of the worst places in the U.S. for it. So I'm not saying everywhere doesn't have their problems.
Yeah.
Seattle, I think we do a fantastic job on race. We're a very mixed pot. No one cares.
No one cares.
We're good there. But the problem with that is everyone's high. So
can't care about race if you're high, though, right?
Yeah. So everywhere has their weaknesses. Houston, that's the one that I feel when I'm there that really has you looking at it. Could you give a couple test questions to ask prospective PM? Yeah, I would run scenarios. So I have, a roof's leaking. It is Friday night, which is always when your roofs leak or your plumbing backs up. It's always Friday night after all the contractors are off. So it's 11 o'clock at night. Someone calls. I have 2 units with water coming in through the ceiling. What does this look like for your team to handle this? You get the call. What happens next? I want to know how a PM is going to react. I don't even care about there's no right answer. It's, do they have a solid answer for that? If there's like, well, our emergency line is here and we'll field the call, and somewhere on Monday, it's like, I don't need somewhere on Monday. I need, what are you going to do right now when this happens? My team's answer to that would be like, okay, most of the contractors are off. We're in Grant County. You're not going to get someone out there. It's just not possible on a Friday night. Here's what we're doing. If it's like it's water on the roof, we're going to make sure the tenants are taken care of. We're going to get people who need to be pulled into a hotel. If it's really bad, we'll pull them into a hotel. If it's a leak that can just be patched or it can be tarped, we will send someone out there. We'll tarp it. We will get it as safe as we can until the next day. If there's water coming in through a wall, we will make sure that we will not go to bed until water is shut off to that unit. We have 24 hours to get it fixed. We will work on it in the morning. If it's midnight, Jonny was at the Robin Hood speaking when we had water flooding through the ceilings of 2 units. They called 1 o'clock in the morning. I got up, and I was also speaking, hosting, and doing all the catering and coordination for this event. I was solo running my own event. Got up at 2 in the morning, got the city emergency line. We got the water shut off. We contacted the tenants and let them know this is what's happening and the timelines that we're anticipating. That's the best you can do. Is it a perfect solution? Hell no. They now don't have water, but we've fixed the flood. That's the type of stuff I want a property manager to be able to communicate. When we give situational things that we've dealt with, how are you handling this? If we have an eviction, what is my responsibility? What is your responsibility? I want to know those things. We will coordinate it. Our lawyer will bill you, because I have billed it through PM and then people just didn't pay me their bill, and I have a bill in my company's name for your eviction. So we don't do that anymore. I do have the lawyer bill you directly, and we will coordinate every single second of your eviction process. We'll go all the way through it. I will sit there in the court Zoom, and we will go through it, because we've done this a ton of times in our portfolio, which is what I want to hear from a PM. There's a plan. For us, the advantage is I've evicted like 20 people. I've been through this process so many times, and we're undefeated in court. Like, I love that about a PM. We have a lot of property managers like, evictions aren't our thing. You figure out your own evictions. We'll just let you know if they're paying or not. Probably not the person I'm going to use. Those type of test questions, though. Johnny, do you have any test questions you'd ask the property manager? What is a sacrificial lamb? Go.
I'd consider that one. No, I mean, I tend to ask about their maintenance personnel.
Yeah.
And their relationship with contractors and how they negotiated the rates with the contractors.
Yeah.
Because, that's a great question to ask. Hey, I know that, property managers, they're going to have contractors.
Yeah.
They're going to have people they work with. The real question is, do they have a negotiated rate and or do they have service level agreements? So you guys haven't really gotten into them yet. When you get a little bit bigger, you start getting into what's called an SLA, service level agreement. I used to have to write these for an HVAC company. I have a few between my company and a few other property managers, especially on the commercial side. But an SLA specifies it's everything. So it's like what our rates are, what we charge for what kind of repairs. If there are repairs that are replacements that are flat rate, those are specified out. What our liability is for response time. When I take care of, I've done it before where I've had a couple of 7-Elevens. Well, the SLA on a 7-Eleven, if I don't respond within 24 hours, which I'm contractually obligated to do, in fact, one of them wanted a 2-hour response window, which means that I could not take care of one of his stores if I could not physically get there within 2 hours of getting a phone call from him. And if, it was going to be down and the equipment ruined product, that came out of my pocket. So an SLA just kind of really boils it down between the property manager and the maintenance company, who's responsible for what, who's getting paid what. And it's something that they can share with you as the owner. They should have no problem being like, yeah, hey, we have an SLA with our maintenance guys. Here's what the terms are. I wish more property management would start adopting those because it's common in the commercial world. Residential they're a couple of years behind.
They're figuring it out, right?
Yeah. One way or another, they're limping through it, but they're getting there.
All right. I have to hop on a podcast at 4, so we have about 3 more minutes. I'm going to try to speed run through the remaining questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap. And then if you don't have anything going on, we can grab food after that, or I can send Johnny on his way. Either way, we'll talk. We'll talk after the episode. Let's speed run these. From Caden, with do deal where you're borrowing half the down payment, are you paying the partner? I'll try to keep these about interest, but I'll answer this really quick. If I borrow half the down payment, am I paying the partner interest on that money? Yes, I am. So they will loan me the money. So you have to be able to support the note either through your cash flow on the property or your cash flow through the rest of your portfolio. It is technically the best structure, I believe, for zero down partnerships. They contribute, say they're doing 100% of the down payment. So all the money in the deal is from them. If you're 50-50, half their money goes towards their equity, half theirs is a loan to you. If you're 20-80 and you can only afford 20% of it as debt, you're a 20% partner, they lend you 20% of the money, they get 80% of the equity, and the rest of their money goes towards their equity. That way you start with your capital accounts balanced. There is nothing to balance at the IRS. It is your money in the deal that matches your equity, which means any depreciation you take can be up to the amount of money you have in the deal. It's your money in the deal. You now get all the tax benefits of the deal. It is the best. I believe this is the best creative deal structure if you're using a joint venture. If you have someone bringing all the money and you have some creative structure, you just have to have a path for how they'll be made whole, but you're not getting any tax benefits if you have no dollars and no risk in that deal. I learned that the hard way by paying $100,000 in tax when I thought I owed $0. However, it all rolls over into this year, and I spent $1 million in reno. So last year I paid 6 years in taxes. There's almost no way I could be paying taxes this year. There's no way.
There we go.
Because I paid them up front, which is the opposite place you want to pay them when you're building.
Yeah.
Are you keeping half the monthly cash flow for your half down? Yep. If we're doing distributions and I own half and I have half the money in, we're doing 50-50 distributions unless you negotiate something else, which I would recommend against. How would you successfully do rent bumps on a newly purchased property? Do you need to do renovations before? I have a quick thing for this. I like to do the renovations, the basic renovations immediately, then do rent bumps. The things that are showy and flashy, not to show off to the tenants. I want them to actually feel that I care because I do. So things like appliances, toilets need to be replaced. But those are the big ones. It's like stoves have burners out. Toilets are missing toilet seats. That happens all the freaking time.
Where did they go?
Why the tenant doesn't replace them for $5 when the owner doesn't, I don't know. But they literally, it happens all the time. There's a bath fan that is like the noisiest thing on earth. Those sort of things, like the livability things that are basic. Buy it, immediately fix all of them, and do them all the same day. Team of contractors out. Everyone sees all the stoves being hauled. They see the fridges being hauled. They're like, oh, things are changing around here. Then the rent bumps come in because you do have to pay for all these things. If you run out of money, no one benefits. And then we do the larger renovations. That's usually how I handle rent bumps, though. Upfront things, make sure you have enough cash to have people go, this feels different. This new ownership, things are going up. Because they are. But if you're just planning all these expensive renovations and raising rent first, your existing tenant base doesn't know that. They think you're another landlord who's coming in jacking rent.
Yeah.
Good summary?
Good summary.
Love it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
Good to drive down here.
Dude, fantastic having you. Everyone, I am live every Wednesday. This was an opportunity to bring Jonny on. He's super smart, and this content needs to be there. So, Jonny, thank you for joining the channel.
Of course. Thanks for having me,
I
man.
appreciate you a ton. Everyone else, we'll see you next Wednesday at 3 Pacific Standard Time.